So, we've talked about how to find the particles in atoms. Now we need to figure out how we can figure more stuff out about it and write about them a bit.
Okay, so if we're going to be writing about them, we need to do what we call notation. The notation of different atoms is going to tell us how many neutrons, how many protons, how many electrons are in the atom, in a neutral atom. So can you give me an example of one of those?
So one way we could see this is we know if we look at the periodic table, we have all these element symbols. So there are these letters that may or may not make sense with what we're looking at.
Okay.
So if we've got an element, so pick an element.
We'll say nitrogen.
Nitrogen. So what's the symbol according to the periodic table for nitrogen?
It's N.
So we start off with the letter N because that's its symbol according to the periodic table.
Okay.
And then we can actually tell a couple other things about that. We can give the atomic number for nitrogen, and what did we say that was?
That's going to be 7.
That's going to be 7. We put our atomic number down on the bottom. So this is our atomic number. That's also known as Z. Okay?
So just to show you real quick where we got that from, if you see N there, it's got a 7 on top of it right there.
Right there.
All right.
So then the other number we can give is our mass number. And so we'll talk a lot more about this later, but our masses can actually vary a little bit depending on our element. So each atoms of the same element can have slightly different masses. Our normal one for nitrogen is going to be 14. This will always be a whole number, even though the periodic table isn't a whole number.
Right, because it says 14.007, so that means somewhere there's some nitrogens that have a mass of 15.
But this is going to be, whenever we're giving this notation, this will be of the specific isotope.
Right.
That's an atom with a particular mass that we're looking at, not the average of all of them.
Right.
So this is our mass number, and that will also be known as A. So you'll remember this because A goes on top of Z.
Okay.
And this is called our nuclear notation.
Because those are the things that are in the neutron, or nucleus.
In the nucleus, yeah. We have to deal with our mass, and we deal with our atomic number, which also told us our what?
Protons.
Protons.
Okay.
Something else we can write that actually gives us a little bit less information, but still helpful information, is what's called hyphen notation. If I can spell the word hyphen. Hyphen notation is just going to give us what element we're looking at and its mass. Because how can we find our atomic number if we don't have it?
I don't know. How do we find that?
Well, how do we find it for nitrogen?
Well, we looked on the periodic table.
We looked on the periodic table. So if we know what element we're looking at, we can find our number, we can find our atomic number, we can find our protons. So what we really need to know is what our mass is going to be.
That particular isotope.
And so if we were going to write our hyphen notation, we would start with the name of our element. The name of our element was what?
Oh, nitrogen.
Nitrogen. So we just write out nitrogen hyphen, so it's going to be a dash, the mass. And so what was our mass?
14.
14. So N with a 14 and a 7, that was nitrogen with a mass of 14, atomic number 7. We can also write it just with our mass in hyphen notation. Occasionally you will also see this where we just use the symbol and the mass. But if you ever got the element name or the element symbol with a hyphen and a number, this number will always, always be your mass.
Right, because I can always look up at the periodic table to find out what the atomic number is.
Right, so we don't need to give you that.
Right.
All right, so now let's do some practice problems using what we just talked about here and what Ms. Restman just talked about in the rest of the video.
All right, so you'll find this in your guided practice. Right,
so this is in your packet, very top of the practice page.
So I see that notation there, the 4219K. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look at the periodic table and try to find the symbol K, which I found here. It is potassium. Yep.
And for those of you who are saying, but potassium doesn't have a K in it, blame Latin, because 90% of the time you're right. Latin for potassium, I believe, is kalium. All right. So yeah, so this is why it's K. It's like sodium being Na. Don't ask science.
So in the hyphen notation, you said the mass goes next to it.
Uh-huh.
So I know my mass is on top of that one.
Right.
So I'm going to put a hyphen and put 42.
42, because that was my top number. Okay?
All right.
So see, our name, really easy. All I've got to do is name, hyphen, mass.
Okay.
All right, and we just said we know our mass number. That's our A.
Okay.
So what's our mass number?
42.
42. And what's our Z? Where did we find our Z?
That's the bottom number.
This is our bottom number. That's 19.
That's our atomic number. Okay.
And so what does our atomic number tell us?
Our atomic number tells us how many protons the atom has.
Okay, so our number of protons is going to be 19. What else can that tell us?
Number of electrons.
Number of electrons. Right now we're assuming we've got neutral atoms, so our protons and our electrons have to be equal for now. Later we'll run into some cases where it's not. All right, and then last but not least, I have my neutrons. Is that going to also be 19?
No, I don't know. What's 42 minus 19?
Right, because man said mass minus atomic number equals neutrons.
I plugged that in my calculator. I got 23.
23. So if we've got a mass of 42 and an atomic number of 19, we have to have 23 neutrons to make that add up.
Okay.
All right, let's try our next one.
Oh.
Our next one just starts with numbers.
There's blanks. I don't. How do I find what atom that is?
Well, let's look at what we know.
Okay.
We know protons and neutrons. Which one can tell us what element we're looking at?
The proton.
Protons.
The protons is the atomic number.
So we also know that's our atomic number, so we can go ahead and move that over here. If we look at the periodic table.
I see number 82 is lead.
Okay, so my name is going to be lead. My mass
is...
How are we going to find our mass?
Oh, I think that's our protons and our neutrons added together.
Our protons and our neutrons added together. It's whatever's in the nucleus.
My calculator for that. 82 plus 128 is equal to 210.
So this is lead 210. Okay?
Okay. So its symbol for lead, it says PB.
This one I can tell you for a fact you blame on Latin.
Yes.
It's plumbum, which is also where we get plumbing, because these make pipes out of lead. All right, so PB, and then what did we put on top if we're doing our nuclear symbol?
That is the number of neutrons, which is...
No, just the neutrons.
Oh, sorry, no, that's the mass.
That's our mass, and so we just said our mass was 210.
210.
So 210 goes on top. What goes on bottom?
The atomic number.
The atomic number, which we already found, which was?
82.
82.
Which is also the number of protons.
Which is also the protons.
Okay.
We just said our mass was
210. Right.
See, a lot of this information is just a matter of figuring out that it's telling you the same thing multiple times.
Right.
And then, so if we know our protons are 82.
Our electrons are also 82.
Our electrons are also 82.
Assuming we have a neutral atom. All right. Now we've got carbon 14. This is one of my favorites since I'm a biologist. Okay, I know the symbol for carbon is C.
Yes.
I am 100% sure of that.
That one is a nice, happy, sensible one.
Okay, so I know by looking at the periodic table that its atomic number is 6.
And where do we put that with our symbol?
Well, that is Z, so that's going to be our bottom number.
Our bottom number. Also, the other thing to remember, your smaller number should always be on bottom on these. If you have a bigger number on bottom, something's gone weird with what you're doing.
Right. So.
All right. So, and then my mass number is actually really easy, because where do I get my mass number?
It's right next to carbon, so it's 14.
It's right there, so it's 14. So we just put that there.
All right. So then, A, our mass number we just wrote there was 14. Our Z we wrote on bottom, which is 6. It's our atomic number.
And our atomic number also tells us
how many protons we have.
And how many
electrons we have.
And the one thing it doesn't tell us is
how many neutrons. So I've got to say, oh, we've got 14 is the mass, so 14 minus 6 is equal to 8.
And there we go.
And that's it.